Mercedes Rule was supposed to deliver her lines during the breakdown scene in The Fisher King, but when Robin Williams started screaming and convulsing on the floor, Mercedes forgot every word of her script. She stood there frozen, watching Robin have what looked like a genuine psychotic break. Director Terry Gilliam whispered to the camera operator, "Keep rolling. This is real." Mercedes later said, "I wasn't watching acting. I was watching a man actually breaking." It was 1991, and director Terry Gilliam was making The Fisher King, a modern fairy tale about trauma, redemption, and madness. The script, written by Richard LaGravenese, told the story of Perry, a homeless man who descended into delusion after witnessing his wife's murder. Robin Williams was playing Perry. The role required Robin to portray someone whose mind had completely fractured, someone living in a fantasy world because reality was too painful to inhabit. It was a character that required accessing deep psychological damage. Terry Gilliam, known for his visually ambitious and emotionally intense films, wanted something raw from Robin. He'd seen Robin do comedy, he'd seen Robin do drama, but he wanted to see Robin completely unguarded, broken, vulnerable, in a way audiences had never witnessed. The scene they were preparing to film was the emotional climax of Perry's character arc, the moment when his delusions crack and the full weight of his trauma comes crashing back. In the script, it was described simply, Perry breaks down.
But Gilliam knew that those 3 words on paper needed to become something visceral on screen. During rehearsals, Robin and Gilliam talked extensively about the scene. Gilliam asked Robin about his own experiences with pain, loss, darkness. Not to exploit Robin's personal life, but to understand what emotional reservoirs Robin could access for the role. Robin was honest in a way that surprised even Gilliam. He talked about his struggles with addiction, his fears, his loneliness, the darkness that lived underneath the comedy. He talked about understanding what it felt like when your mind became unreliable, when you couldn't trust your own thoughts. "I know what it's like when your brain turns on you," Robin told Gilliam. "I've been there. Not to the extent Perry has, but I felt the edges of it." Gilliam asked, "Can you go there for this scene? Completely?" Robin's answer was immediate. "Yes, but I need you to tell me when to stop. Because once I go there, I might not be able to find my way back on my own."
It was a remarkably vulnerable admission from an actor to a director, that he was willing to go to a psychological place so dark that he'd need help returning from it. They scheduled the breakdown scene for late in the production. Gilliam wanted Robin to have lived with Perry for weeks before filming this crucial moment. He wanted the character to be so deeply embedded in Robin that the breakdown could come from a real place rather than a performed place. The day of the shoot, the set had an unusual energy. The crew had worked with Robin for weeks and had seen him bring incredible depth to Perry. But they sensed that today was going to be different. Mercedes Rule, who was playing Lydia, the woman who helps Perry begin to heal, was in the scene. She'd rehearsed with Robin multiple times. In rehearsals, Robin had given an intense but controlled performance of the breakdown. It was good, professional, effective. But Gilliam had pulled Robin aside before the actual take and given him different direction. "Forget the rehearsals," Gilliam said quietly. "Forget everything we planned. When we start rolling, I just want you to break completely. Access whatever you need to access. Go as far as you need to go. I'll tell you when to stop."
Robin nodded, understanding what Gilliam was asking for. Not a performance of a breakdown, but an actual breaking. They set up for the take. Mercedes was in position. The crew was ready. Gilliam called action. The scene began as scripted. Mercedes delivered her lines to Robin. Robin responded, his character Perry still trying to maintain his delusional fantasy world. And then something shifted. Robin's face began to change, not in the controlled way of an actor adjusting their expression, but in the involuntary way of someone whose emotions are overwhelming them. His breathing became erratic. His eyes went wild with genuine panic. And then he started screaming.
Not the calculated scream of an actor hitting an emotional beat, but the raw, primal scream of someone whose psychological defenses have completely collapsed. Robin dropped to the floor, convulsing, sobbing, making sounds that didn't seem human. His entire body was shaking. Tears and saliva were streaming down his face. He was clawing at the ground like he was trying to physically escape from something.
Mercedes, standing above him, was supposed to deliver her next lines. She had them memorized. She'd rehearsed them a dozen times. But every word vanished from her mind. She stood there, frozen, watching Robin Williams have what looked like a genuine psychotic break on the floor in front of her. Her actress brain was trying to kick in, trying to remember the script, trying to stay in character. But her human brain had taken over, and all she could do was witness. Terry Gilliam, watching the monitors, saw Mercedes freeze. He saw her face register shock, fear, confusion, real emotions, not performed ones. He grabbed the camera operator's arm and whispered urgently, "Keep rolling. Don't stop. This is real." The camera operator nodded, keeping the camera steady on Robin's breakdown and Mercedes' genuine reaction to it. Robin was now in a full emotional collapse. He was hyperventilating, making choking sounds, his words becoming incoherent. It looked like someone having a panic attack mixed with a nervous breakdown, the kind of thing you'd see in an emergency room, not on a film set.
The crew was dead silent. Nobody moved. Sound technicians who'd worked dozens of intense, dramatic scenes felt uncomfortable watching this. It was too raw, too real, too vulnerable. Mercedes finally managed to move. She knelt down next to Robin, but she wasn't delivering her scripted lines. She'd abandoned the script entirely. Instead, she was just responding to Robin as a human being in distress, saying things like, "It's okay," and "I'm here." Not Lydia's words, but Mercedes' words. The breakdown continued for 4 minutes. 4 uninterrupted minutes of Robin Williams completely shattered on the floor, with Mercedes Ruehl bearing witness, no longer acting, but simply being present with someone in pain. Finally, Gilliam called cut. The set stayed frozen. Nobody moved for a solid 10 seconds. Robin was still on the floor, gasping for air, his face red and wet with tears and sweat. He couldn't stand up. His body was shaking so hard that he physically couldn't get to his feet. Mercedes was crying, not character crying, but actually crying. She looked at Gilliam with an expression that said, "What did we just do?"
Gilliam walked over to Robin, knelt down next to him. Robin, look at me. You're back. You're here. It's over." It took about 30 seconds before Robin's eyes focused, and he seemed to recognize where he was. He looked at Gilliam and whispered, "Did you get it?" Gilliam nodded. "We got it." "Good," Robin said, "because I can't do that again." They took a break. Robin went to his trailer, accompanied by a production assistant who Gilliam had specifically instructed to stay with him. The crew stood around in small groups, processing what they'd just witnessed. Mercedes found Gilliam. "Terry, what the hell was that?" She wasn't angry, just shaken. "That was Robin going somewhere I asked him to go," Gilliam said. "Somewhere deep and real and painful."
"I forgot every line," Mercedes admitted. "I completely forgot the script. I couldn't think. I could only react."
"I know," Gilliam said. "I saw. And that's what's going in the movie. Your real reaction, not the scripted one." Mercedes processed this. As an actress, there was part of her that felt like she'd failed. She'd forgotten her lines, broken character, let her emotions as Mercedes override her performance as Lydia. But as an artist, she understood what Gilliam was saying. What they'd captured wasn't a performance. It was a real moment of one human being witnessing another human being's pain. And that was more powerful than any scripted exchange could have been. After about 20 minutes, Robin emerged from his trailer. He looked exhausted, drained, but more himself. He walked over to Mercedes. "I'm sorry if I scared you," he said quietly.
"You didn't scare me," Mercedes said, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. You went somewhere I've never seen an actor go before." "That's because I wasn't acting," Robin admitted. "Not completely. Gilliam told me to break, and I opened a door I usually keep locked, and everything came out."
They finished filming that day, though everyone was emotionally spent. The crew was quieter than usual during the remaining setups. Something had shifted in how they all saw Robin, not as a comedian playing a dramatic role, but as an artist willing to genuinely fracture himself for the truth of a scene. In the editing room weeks later, Gilliam watched the breakdown scene over and over. Every time it hit him the same way, the raw, unfiltered honesty of Robin's breakdown and Mercedes' completely genuine reaction to witnessing it. He showed it to Richard LaGravance, the screenwriter. "This isn't what I wrote," Richard said, not as a criticism, but as an observation. "No," Gilliam agreed. "It's better, because it's real." The Fisher King premiered in September 1991. Critics praised both Robin and Mercedes' performances. Mercedes won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. Robin was nominated for Best Actor. But the people who'd been on set that day knew something the critics and audiences didn't. The power of that scene came from Robin actually breaking, not acting at breaking. And Mercedes' Oscar-winning performance in that moment was her forgetting to act and simply witnessing. In interviews after the film's release, Mercedes was careful about how she discussed the breakdown scene. She didn't want to exploit Robin's vulnerability or suggest he'd been reckless or unprofessional. But years later, after Robin's death, Mercedes spoke more openly about what she'd witnessed. "The breakdown scene terrified me," she admitted in a 2015 interview. "Not because Robin was scary, but because what I was seeing wasn't performance. Robin had accessed something real and broken inside himself. When he started screaming and convulsing, I stopped being Lydia and became Mercedes, watching Robin Williams have what looked like a genuine psychological collapse." She continued, "People ask me about that Oscar all the time, and I'm proud of it. But the truth is, in that scene, I'm not acting. I forgot every line. What you're seeing on screen is my real reaction to watching someone I cared about genuinely suffer. That's not a performance. That's documentary footage of me witnessing pain." Terry Gilliam, asked about the scene in various interviews over the years, has always maintained that it was the most intense thing he's ever captured on film. "I've directed a lot of emotionally intense scenes," Gilliam said, "but nothing compared to that. Because Robin wasn't hiding behind the character. He was using the character as permission to express something real. And once he started, it was like watching a dam break. Everything came out." Gilliam also acknowledged the risk of what he'd asked Robin to do. "I told Robin to break, and he trusted me enough to actually do it. That's a huge responsibility as a director. You're asking someone to make themselves psychologically vulnerable, to access pain that could hurt them, and then you're capturing it on film forever. I knew while it was happening that we were creating something powerful, but I also worried about Robin. Could he come back from where I'd sent him?" Robin did come back, though he said the scene took something out of him that was hard to recover. In a 1991 interview, shortly after the Fisher King's release, Robin was asked about the breakdown scene. "Terry asked me to go to a dark place," Robin said carefully, "and I went. I accessed things I usually keep buried. Pain, fear, loneliness, all the stuff I normally deflect with humor. And for those 4 minutes, I let it all out. No filter, no protection, just raw emotion." The interviewer asked if it was difficult. "It was necessary," Robin replied. "The character required it. The scene required it. But yes, it was difficult. Because once you open those doors, it takes work to close them again." The breakdown scene in The Fisher King became one of the most celebrated moments in Robin Williams' dramatic career. Film students study it, actors reference it, critics cite it as proof of Robin's range. But for the people who were there when it was filmed, it represents something more than great acting. It represents an artist making a choice to be completely vulnerable, to access genuine pain, to break himself open in service of truth. Mercedes Ruehl forgot her lines that day, not because she was unprepared, but because she was human. She was watching someone she knew, someone she cared about, someone she respected, genuinely suffer. And in that moment, the script became irrelevant. Terry Gilliam whispered, "Keep rolling, this is real," not to be exploitative, but because he recognized they were capturing something rare. Not a performance of pain, but pain itself, framed by the context of a story, but no less genuine for that framing. And Robin Williams screamed and convulsed and broke, not because the script required it, but because he'd given himself permission for 4 minutes to stop performing strength and simply express the darkness that lived inside him. That's not just great filmmaking. That's an artist willing to bleed for truth. And everyone who witnessed it understood they'd seen something that transcended movies and became, for 4 minutes, uncomfortably, powerfully real.